Cosmic here, and welcome back to another Legends of Runeterra video, and I could not be more excited. I knew yesterday was going to be pretty hype, and I made a post on Twitter about like what I kind of hoped that Trundle would have because of how important it would be to the archetype, and we quite literally got everything I asked for. So obviously, I'm going to be a little bit more hyped than probably most people are going to be for this, but hey, I'm a LoR player, I love ramp decks, and this does, again, quite literally everything that I could have asked for. Again, now how good is it? We'll have to wait until we see those last few cards remaining, because on the 25th, they're going to reveal the full set, or they should reveal the full set. They do what they did last time. So there are still key pieces missing from this, or cards that we want to combine with this. And again, based on the data mine, based on the voice lines, based on A-Soul and all that stuff, I'm still assuming that A-Soul is going to be part of the Behold archetype, just meaning it's a high-costed card and it's going to work well together because Freljord brings the ramp. And haha, surprise, surprise, we got some interesting stuff on, actually all three of these cards are interesting, right? We have some really interesting Targon cards on here as well that actually give us some idea of kind of what's to come next, or what might be coming, right, for Mount Targon. So super excited for everything from a potential standpoint. At least me personally, again, slightly biased because I love Freljord. I've hit Masters with it 3 times now because it's just my favorite region. But I do think this is going to be actually somewhat decent, and we could see this take a solid spot in the meta. Again, also relying on somewhat yesterday's spoilers. So all of that nonsense out of the way. Trundle, let's talk about it. So it's a 5 cost, and I'm going to stop right there. For those that don't know the ramp archetype, right? So if you're playing a War Mother's version, if you're playing the War Mother's Less version, which was just like Tryndamere and Thresh, the 5-drop cards in your deck are so important. And before this, we had Hearthguard, and that was it. And if you missed that, ramp on turn 3, skip your 4 on a turn, go to 5, and you didn't have Hearthguard, it's like, well, what did I do at this point? Like, I didn't really get to do anything, right? So Trundle comes down, and he fills that role, but he does so much more than that because of obviously everything else that he does. So he has regeneration. And again, I've already seen some comments on Reddit, and like people just forget, regeneration is really strong in Runeterra, right? The fact that you can just turn over turn, just battle through and heal up to full, especially in the region that has things like Fury of the North, right? No matter what, like, it's a super sticky card that your opponent has to do like very weird plays to then sometimes remove it. So that's already a plus for me. And then I was like, okay, well, how do we make this where the Behold mechanic is, we don't want to play a ton of 8+ cost cards. Our hand just becomes bricked. It's really awkward. And then we have Trundle, right? So he gets to summon, when he summoned rather, create an Ice Pillar in hand, which is an 8-cost card, automatically meaning for the rest of the game, because obviously you're going to have the one in it. It's very hard to remove. You're going to be able to have the Behold mechanic very easily. Obviously, if they have like a Ruination or something, or if they just Thermo Beam for an ungodly amount, right, it could be very bad. But keeping in mind, they can't like bounce it because you still have the 8-drop card in your hand. And what's also cool about this is it replays itself for free. So I am super excited for this. So his level up is you've played the Ice Pillar. So Ice Pillar itself, I do want to take a moment. It does have vulnerable on it, right? So this is something that your opponent is going to be able to attack into. It is coming down at the mana 8 turn, which generally for your opponent is mana 6. So they should be able to, do like an attack plus a removal and probably clean it up. But again, for every turn that this is sticking around, and both on play, I guess I should mention that. So play and round start, give the strongest enemy vulnerable this round. And again, vulnerable is very good. We've seen how strong this can be on Sejuani, who of course has that, 5 attack and overwhelm with her, so there's a bit more versatility in it, right? If they have like a 1/1 Spiderling, then you can grab the Spiderling instead, get through a bunch more damage. But again, we're in Freljord, we have freeze effects, we have Fury of the North. This allows us to have that turn over turn board control, or I guess every other turn because, right, attack token. If they play a big threat, we get to kill it. Again, downside of this will be things like Neverglade Collector, where it's only a 2/4, so you don't get to get the trigger for it for the vulnerable, so that's kind of unfortunate, but most of the time, and I think on the more than likely, right, so above average, more than 50% of the time, what have you, this will probably be a hit. And then again, as I mentioned, it's going to refill 8 mana, so you don't lose anything by getting to play this. So that alone, like, I was super stoked about this. I'm like, perfect. Trundle comes down at a very important turn for ramp, has regeneration, so it's going to stick around, and gives you the free enabler that you need for the entire Behold mechanic. And I really can't stress this enough because, You know, things like Zed, where it's just like attacking, or Quinn, they're just like, you know, generic good does value stuff, right? But Trundle finally enables the entire archetype off one card. That really goes to show that they want this to be a proper keyword that people are using in this next set. Now, again, is it going to be full-on ramp like War Mothers, or is it going to be a slightly slower version where maybe we do use that 2-drop from yesterday ramp, right? Who knows? Well, we have to see more of this set to really have a fundamental understanding of it. And then again, because of the Targon cards that are on here, is there something else coming from Mount Targon? Again, most likely ASOL, that we haven't seen yet that will go well with this, right? We really have to wait and see what those other key pieces are going to be. But at least from, you know, what my worries were yesterday to today, I feel a lot better. Now, again, I would still put this at more like a you know, from the Freljord core itself, it's probably still just going to be like a solid tier 2. There's a lot of things that we have to see, like what other kind of interaction tools do we have? Is there some super late bomb besides War Mothers that we'll eventually get? I like the direction that this is going in, but it's still missing some key pieces of either interaction or just board stability, right? Because the Icequake, which we'll get to in a bit, does some of that, but not everything that we need. So, again, still super excited for this, and it just, the spoilers today, again, I think we're the best we've got so far, just because it finally feels like a new archetype that's not just like, you know, support curve the board. This has more going for it. So anyways, I was actually talking about the level up version, right? So Trundle, he gains Overwhelm. So again, just talking about, well, regeneration is strong. That's great. And it's like, oh, well, you know, yesterday we were talking about, you know, stats are nice and everything, but, well, if you just put a bunch of stats on something that doesn't have Overwhelm, it's pretty worthless. Well, Trundle has exactly that. So when I'm summoning, create an Ice Pillar in hand, so even if he's flipped, you still get it. So again, it's really nice that you can keep cycling them. Now, depending on your board slots and what you have available to you, right, having just a 0-8 on the board might not be what you want. You might actually just need a body to swing through. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But then attack, grant me +1 for each 8+ card you behold. So again, in play or in your hand. And again, that one key word I'd like to call out here is grant. So now we have a card that should, by all accounts, get bigger every single turn, naturally has Overwhelm and regeneration. 7 HP is pretty bloody tanky, right? We think about how this matches up to a lot else of other cards in the meta. 7 HP is really, really difficult to interact with and remove, where they usually have to spend quite a few cards. So if they're spending, you know, 2 to 3 cards to finally try and kill your Trundle, and then you're like, well, Fury of the North, gotcha, right? It's going to just be a blowout for this. So I am very excited to see what Trundle can do. And again, the caveat here that I'll add is, while Ice Pillar is very nice, and I do think this is like the key enabler that they wanted, it's then going to shift the question of, okay, well, how do we make sure that we still have, you know, an 8-costed card in our hand, or maybe it is just, you know, Ice Pillars going the distance for us. We have to kind of wait and see what that looks like. And again, all signs we could ever ask for are still pointing to some 8+ key costed card that we have not seen yet is somewhere in this first set. So we'll have to wait and see. I am hoping it's not Icequake, but you never know. The other card that I'm just beyond excited about that, again, I've seen some kind of mixed feelings about, and I kind of get it because the sequencing in this play is going to be a little bit awkward, but Augur of the Old One. So it has Overwhelm and Regeneration. I just very well explained why that's so good. And then if you behold a 8-costed card, grant an ally Overwhelm and Regeneration. Okay, so you are able to grant your entire board, obviously if you're playing multiple copies of these, right, the important cards, you're able to give them Overwhelm and Regeneration. So now this turns things like a late game Hearthguard, right, or just whatever you might need, into a real threat. It becomes like an 8/8 Overwhelm Regeneration. So again, in my mind, this card is nuts. I don't know what's going to be the best target for it, but those are two very, very strong keywords for a, you know, not hard cost, as now we're seeing, to apply to an ally. So I don't know what's going to be the best unit in Freljord. I guess I always go to like, oh, She Who Wonders, right? Let's just give that thing Overwhelm while we can. It already has Regeneration, so that's kind of redundant, but a 10/10 Overwhelm is pretty bloody spicy. So we'll have to wait and see. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think Augur, both Trundle and Augur, just for like what they're offering, as long as we still have a little bit more support coming later in the spoiler season, this is going to be an archetype that, again, I'm obviously excited for because I'm a little bit biased, but I think will actually be somewhat decent. That's just two very strong keywords. that you just can't pass up, in my opinion. Moving on from there, we have Trundle's Icequake. So this is the card that's the Mega Avalanche is what he screams. They didn't do it in the video, which I'm really sad. It's like the key line that they could have used. So a little bit of a missed opportunity in my opinion, but still fine. And the icon is missing here, but it is an epic, right? So give all units -3 this round and then deal 3 to all units. So again, our entire board has regeneration. We don't care. Yes, this is a very high costed spell, but again, thinking about Failure, all our units are generally just going to be big stat bodies, and outside of something like Demacia, 3 attack is super significant, especially if you think about like the elusive style of strategies, although resolving a cost spell might be difficult, I get it. 3 attack is really, or 3 damage I should say, is really that sweet spot for so many cards, right? We talk about this over and over and over with Runeterra, like the 2 HP, 3 HP, and 4 HP, and how significant each one of those gaps are. So I'll be completely honest. I have no idea where this is going to fit a spot. I like it for what it's trying to do. If we get to make regeneration the board a thing, obviously it's a good fit there, right? It's no brainer in my mind, because your board has regenerate. You play this, you weaken all their units, and they have 3 less attack. You're probably still able to swing out. So this should end up being a one-sided board wipe, assuming you have the units and then attack 3 for damage. So we'll have to see, right? Revitalizing Rose. So this is a card that I'm not excited about, but I know I should be. So this one's difficult. It's a 7-cost slow. Pick a unit in your hand, reveal, heal your Nexus by its power. So, and then Enlightening can reduce its cost to 0, right? So obviously a free late game heal would be super awesome, but you still have to reveal a specific unit in your hand, and it's like, okay, well, if you have She Who Wonders, that can be great for the 10, and then you play it, but how much does that level of healing really matter, right? So I'm not sure this is going to see a place. Like, we already have Tavern Keeper, we already have Catalyst of Aeons, and like in those ramp style of decks, that's kind of all you need. Maybe this is a one of, and maybe I'm undervaluing it, but it feels really awkward to try to have a a particular unit in your hand. Obviously, late game, it should be fairly easy to have a decent amount of heal off of it. But again, let's just say we have Trundle in our hand still. Then it's like, all right, well, I'm healing 5. It's not super exciting. So again, I think this goes back to, there has to be a card that's not revealed yet that goes in this archetype that's going to make me like even more excited for this card. But at least right now, this is the weakest, or I guess that's not the fair. It's the card I'm least excited for. I'll put it that way. Everything else seems pretty good, and then these last 2 other cards that we have. So that's all we have for Trundle. Again, that's not going to be all of his cards, right? We know that there's going to be more cards revealed on the 25th, but they did decide to sneak in a couple more Targon cards. And these ones in particular, in my opinion, are kind of like a little bit of a, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, like on the Lulu spoiler, but this tells me that like a healing matters, and or they know that the other cards we're going to get is just going to be, we have to run healing because the way that the game is going, right? So I'm hoping it's more of a, if you've healed X, level up type of thing. But Broadback Protector. Round start, heal your Nexus 3. Deal damage to me equal to the amount healed. So obviously the very first thing that we can notice off this, we have a regeneration enabler. This takes only 3 damage a turn. You can just, unless you have multiple, I guess, because they'd each trigger, right? You can effectively infinite heal 3 every single turn that this is in play. Now, in some matchups, right, if you think about Deep, they could just have Abyssalize into Atrocity, and you have 0 ways of interacting with that outside of like a Harsh Winds, but then you die in the next turn. You know what I'm trying to say? So how good is that going to be? I have no idea. It's crazy that it's an epic, and it has 7 HP on turn 4. So it's not really like blocking a ton, but it does stick around for quite a bit. And again, you can just decide to not use it to block and then heal 3 anyways in the next turn. But again, if we give it regeneration, what are we doing with that other than just making sure we're getting 3 health every turn? And then, of course, if we put on some kind of like grant buffs, right? So again, thinking about Targon, apparently right now their entire thing is about granting stats. Remember, permanent buff. So buffing this up to like a 5/10, sure, I guess. Again, having to make sure that's going to have regeneration on it, but this becomes a very tanky unit eventually. So it's really going to be curious to see if healing matters in some form. And then the last card that we have is the Stellacorn. Play, heal an ally and your Nexus 3. Again, not super excited for this card. It's like a super Tavern Keeper, right? Which could be good. I like that it is a 5-drop, and we've talked about earlier on how important 5-drops are for ramp decks because you go from 3 to 5. but you're not really healing anything. An ally on turn 5, if that's what you've done, so that first part doesn't matter. Heals your Nexus 3, which is nice, and it's a 4/5, so obviously it's got the extra stats. So again, both of these cards lead me to believe there's going to be some kind of, heal your unit, heal your Nexus, do some kind of effect. And I'm really hoping that's the case, because again, my initial thoughts was going to be Trundle and Aesol was going to be the archetype. Again, assuming that the Aesol is going to be a very expensive card, very high-costed stuff across the board, and then Trundle was going to have this more like ramp mechanic behind it, because they have or two different, very unique voice lines about interacting with one another, and going out onto Runeterra and doing stuff. So really hoping that all comes together. So with that, at least we haven't even seen the other half of this archetype, and I already like it a lot more than the support archetype. Obviously, I think Lulu, at least for what it's doing, both for that direct archetype and the non-support Ionia decks, I think it's done quite a bit of job for that. So at least Lulu, in terms of versatility, I get that's probably the most exciting one. Trundle, if you don't like these style of decks, you probably won't like it, but I can see how these are going to be very annoying when you just have regeneration on the board and big blocky units that they can't beat. Obviously, they play like Ruination and You Cry, but that's how a lot of decks go, right? If you think about any Demacia board-heavy deck, it's like, well, I can't beat a well-timed Ruination, so I'll do what I can. But I am really, really looking forward to the other half of this archetype and finding out what that means. So with that, it's another champion in the books. Oh, and as mentioned in the Discord, but a few people have been asking me, so I'm going to take the 25th off streaming, and I'm going to do kind of like a big set review, which I might do in terms of like archetypes. So archetypes, again, meaning Taric and Lulu, Trundle, and again, I'm assuming Aesol, right? And talking about these 3 archetypes, or 4 if we get 1 extra, at a high level, and trying to understand like where their places are going to be in the meta, what particular decks look like, and then just try to like give a rating to them. So look forward to that video coming out then, but that'll be kind of a much longer going in depth over each card. It's obviously going to be like an over an hour long type of video, so it's we'll have to see. But if you're looking forward to that type of thing, definitely make sure to subscribe for future videos, because I will give and it might not be like a direct star rating for each one, right? But it will be some kind of evaluation on all the cards for this first set. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this look at Trundle. Obviously, I'm excited. I got to stop gushing about it. But with that, everybody else, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Drink your water, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.